In the United States, 2020 has been a year of some of the most intense difficulties that the American populace has ever faced. We've seen hundreds of thousands die to COVID-19, and as the government struggles to contain and hold on to any sort of organization when it comes to containing this deadly virus, we've also seen one of the most incredibly powerful and widespread social movements that has also ever been seen in American history. Following the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis by Minneapolis Police Department officers, the country sprang into action. We saw protests across the country in major cities and even in small towns. My particular small town in Western Massachusetts even had a protest that drew more than 200 people to our demonstration. This is the sort of movement that to the media would appear to be spontaneous, appear to be chaotic and uncontrolled. But this fight has been going on for decades. In the years following the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, white America was lulled into a false sense of security that the government had dealt with the Jim Crow South and taken moral weight off the North and solved the racial problem in the United States. But it is a historical fact that in the years following the passage of those two acts, that African Americans experienced some of the worst conditions since the end of slavery. The North found ways around the act, continued with their constant institutions of redlining, de facto school segregation, amongst other things, and the South refused in many large cities to even enforce the Civil Rights Act. Military action was brought in by the president to try and enforce these things. We had seen in previous years schools forcefully desegregated by the government. And yet, in the years following these two acts, the South barely changed as a society. There was still incredible wealth gaps for years. There was still police brutality veiled behind this idea that the black criminal was plaguing the South. And if this sounds familiar, that's because this fight is still going on. It's in the same places. In those cities in the South, the police departments have not changed. They police black neighborhoods like they're a war zone or like a bomb is waiting to go off. These people are constantly under surveillance, and they are over-policed in the sense that in white neighborhoods, the same amount of crime may be committed. But the black people in these neighborhoods, in these cities in the South and in the North, are over-policed. More arrests are made, and more people, at the end of the day, are imprisoned. And we've seen in the United States how difficult it is to break free from a criminal record once you're finally out of imprisonment, however long that is, and find a future. It just so happens that George Floyd was someone who spent time in prison. But to a lot of people in the United States, that does not mean that he deserved to die. He deserved a future where going to prison didn't mean the end of his life, where the color of his skin didn't determine whether someone could kneel on his neck and kill him. And despite all of this, all the sorrow and grief that 2020 has brought to supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement, to supporters of racial justice, to those who wish to defund the police, abolish prisons, there is hope. In the state of Mississippi, in Jackson, there's a group of people who go by the name of Cooperation Jackson. Their mission is to create a space in one of the poorest areas of the United States where there's a future for black people to be healthy, to be safe, to not live in fear of police brutality and death on a daily basis. They've built farms, they've built workplaces, they've built meeting rooms. They've established a political bloc of people who are not only active on the local level, but politically aware on the national level. This is an incredibly powerful movement, and yet it is so contained to a small area. So that is what I would say to those who went out on the streets this summer. Find ways in your community to find solidarity with other people who think the same things are wrong in this country as you do. If racial justice is the issue at the top of your list, find other people who prioritize that same issue. Cooperation Jackson works because people are so focused on this one issue that they realize that racial justice is connected to economics, is connected to public health, and in a time like this in 2020, those things are incredibly important. The American has lost their job at a more frequent rate than has been seen in my lifetime or my parents' lifetime. There are more people not able to make rent and not able to make their house payments than in my lifetime or my parents'. This is an incredibly troubling time. But if people can find solidarity in their communities, like is being done in Jackson, Mississippi by Cooperation Jackson, perhaps there is a future where there are communities that exist that are free from police brutality, that have abolished the police, and they have a new way of policing their community in a way that doesn't require weapons and doesn't require fear-mongering and threats on people's lives to keep the peace. Because in a world where people trust each other and share resources and understand that they're being exploited and that they can help each other if they just generate their own production and find these ties of solidarity between each other, perhaps there is a world in the United States, even in a place like Jackson, Mississippi, that is free from white supremacy, that is free from police brutality, and can produce a world for future generations where they don't have to live in fear. I hope personally that that future is a possibility, and I hold out for that future every day.